Директор службы внешней разведки Российской Федерации Сергей Евгеньевич Naryshkin.
Director of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, Sergei Naryshkin.
Esteemed participants of the conference, friends and partners, the importance or even acute necessity of broad dialogue of this kind, as it is seen from the latest events, is becoming ever more important. And in the beginning of the year, politicians and the military in different areas of the globe were certain hopes that a realistic victory in international affairs will be the winner. However, many believe that the common sense will prevail and the countries will jointly, on mutual respect and trust, move ahead to regulate regional conflicts and search for new answers of such challenges like international terrorism. Until now, these hopes fail, and we have to state that our partners in the West could not overcome the inertia and get rid of egoistic viewpoint on international relations. They continue to conduct dialogue from the position of force without any reference to the international law. And in the relations of Russia, such tactics has no future. Any attempt of the West to put pressure on our country and integrate Russia as the junior partner is doomed to failure. And we will continue to cooperate only on equal basis, with mutual consideration of the whole comprehensive complex of issues towards each other. And we are convinced that only such approach would be able to sustain a global and regional balance of powers and maintain a good neighborhood relationship between countries and peoples, and striving under different prerequisites to impose their will lead to nowhere but to more chaos in the international systems. And perhaps this is the reason for this crisis and other crises and human miseries. And this is clearly seen as we take as an example Middle East, Northern Africa, and this region was never stable. However, lately it turned out to be a hostage of some others' geopolitical game and the attempts of West to draw their own configuration of this area, like Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, led to nothing, only developed a wave of chaos and violence. They violated the fragile internal balance in the region and cost the lives of millions of peoples who are very far from big politics: children, women, elder people. And the existence of quasi-state ISIS could not exist without any foreign support. And this is also the result of the activity of our Western partners and their regional allies to achieve their selfish goals. And once the United States new administration took over, we thought there is a new dawn and there will be a new situation in the Middle East and will get normalized. However, the recent attack of Tomahawk missiles in Syria, which was a stronghold for the attack of the government forces on ISIS forces, makes us doubtful about the ability to comply with the promises Mr. Trump made during his election campaign. And in reality, whatever is seen, these are the facts of demonstration of power, which was not coordinated with anybody, like the explosion of the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. and it will never have positive effects. And the reason is to ask why that message was sent. And we still are cautious when we see the single-sided approach to international policy, like coming back of Washington and his allies to confrontation rhetorics towards Iran and attempt to interfere into internal political processes in Turkey, imposing a political settlement in Libya. And there are lots of risks in terms of Middle East regulations against the background of growing tension in the region. And the deadlock of this negotiation process will push the participants of this dialogue and to achieve these goals by violent means. Of course, the very worrisome is the situation in the Korean Peninsula, and North Korea is under tremendous international pressure because they're seceding of the non-proliferation agreements and activity in the nuclear force. However, it differs very little from the decision of Washington to secede the agreement of anti-ballistic missile defense agreement, and that contributes only to the interests of the United States. And again, we are coming across the situation when Jupiter is allowed to do anything, and the bull is playing the role of a victim. Maniacal attempts to see and to prove who is the master on the peninsula will lead to nothing but to escalation of tension, as many times happened. This demonstration of military power could provoke actual military conflict, including the exchange of missile attack. And the largest regional players should do everything possible not to allow to lead this to that escalation and held this situation from the points of no return. And the Western borders with Western countries could be explained by the aggressive course of NATO and the massive fortification of the military infrastructure close to our borders. And this is a priority of NATO for a long time period. We believe serious threat to regional and global stability is the decision of NATO allies about cyberspace, one of the spheres of armed struggle. We are talking about legalization of planning and cyber attacks against the potential adversary. Modern wars and conflicts assume more and more hybrid character. They embrace not only military, but also socio-economic, cultural, and information sphere, which actually is turned to independent spheres of battlefield. Specific tension is seen in the ideological and information phase, and this phase is very acute and comes closer to the passions of the Cold War, and sometimes they even supersede it. And the difference is only the ideology is pushed not by the Eastern Bloc, but Western elites, at least that part of the West, which doesn't want to get rid of neoliberal and globalist approach. This agenda is the so-called imposing their will. And we see the situation that the notion of the majority in public and social process is becoming marginal. The majority cannot protect their rights in the face of aggressive minorities. They have to apologize all the times and justify the mere fact of their existence. And in the near future, the prospect of weakening of information competition is not seen. On the contrary, the struggle for the minds of people will become more and more intensive and will embrace many more spheres. It will be escorted by broad dissemination of the so-called fake news, innovative technologies to influence the masses, and the combination of virtual and objective reality. In this world of post-truth, the mission of strengthening of information sovereignty is becoming ever important than the augmentation of the defense potential or development of national economy. The greatest challenge to collective security is international terrorism. And in line with the spirit of the time, the terrorist activity is also globalized, as is seen by the activity of terrorists in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and recent tragic events in London, Paris, Stockholm, and Brussels, and the latest terrorist attack in St. Petersburg. There's no single country in the world who could consider themselves heaven and insured from terrorist attacks, and the whole world is turned to the area and sphere of the global threat, and terrorist activity becomes sometimes the situation of everyday life in many cities. At least the terrorists would like to convince us on that, and they use terrorists in their selfish purposes. The complexity of such an event like international terrorism once again proves the fact that it is extremely difficult to resist it standing alone. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, we all understand how difficult is the situation today to live and work, and this transition period is far from being finished, and this instability will continue to grow, making more acute the general threats and will lead to new threats. In these conditions, we need coordinated actions of the whole world community, and that should be done through diplomatic channels and public institutions, and also at the level of law enforcement bodies and structures. And I'm sure that our meeting in Moscow will become a prominent step in strengthening international security and global and regional threats and in the fight with international terrorism. Thank you for your attention.